going on, YouTube? So today I wanted to do my top 25 rankings heading into week 12 of the 2015 season. So another crazy week in college football. I feel like I'm saying that every week, but it really was. So a couple upsets. A couple teams knocked out of the top 10. 4 teams were actually knocked out of the top 10 this past weekend. But yeah, go and start with my 5 outside. Excuse me, sorry. Sorry. At 5 I got UCLA. So they did lose, what was it, 31? I don't know why I want to put a 31 in there. Yeah, 31-27 to UCLA. So, or they lost 31-27 to Washington State. So, I actually had that as one of my upsets of the week, and it wasn't one that was difficult to predict. You can't really blame that game on any one player for UCLA. I mean, they played a pretty solid game. The defense wasn't fantastic, but they just ran into a good team. Paul Perkins had a nice little game on the ground. Had 120 rushing yards, no touchdowns, but still, you can't blame that on him. And then Josh Rosen, not his best game. Didn't have any passing touchdowns, but did have a rushing touchdown. Also did not, I don't think he turned the ball over. He might have fumbled. But, so just a good game by Washington State. And like I said, UCLA is going to run into inconsistencies this year, but they're also going to win some big games, which is why they're still in my 5 outside. You just know that they're still going to be hanging around. So move on to my next one, which is Bowling Green. They do have a bye week, but I still am pretty high on Bowling Green. I think they're a pretty hot team right now, especially one of the better teams outside the Power 5. All right, so move on to my third one, which is Toledo. Toledo won 28-23 against a pretty good Central Michigan team, honestly. Central Michigan team has put up a tough fight this year, really, whenever they played. But, Toledo was able to shake off the Northern Illinois loss and get back on track. The one that knocked them out of, the one that basically obviously gave them the first loss, knocked them out of any chance they had of making the college football playoff or a New Year's Six bowl. But I do think if they win out, they can at least crack the top 25 again. All right, so my second one is Georgia. So they won 20-13 against Auburn, and not too much to say. They had to play against Jeremy Johnson, so it really wasn't that good a game to watch. It was a defensive struggle for sure. Excuse me. So Georgia did win on a punt return. Like I said, not a great game to watch, but it was still an entertaining game, one that could have an outcome in just, I guess, the bowl seedings for the SEC if Auburn does make a bowl game. And I think it was a big win for Georgia. They obviously are struggling this year ever since Nick Chubb got injured. I believe that brings them to 7-3 now. Yeah, and it's weird to see a 7-3 Georgia team that's not ranked, but watching them this year, it's been ugly. All right, so move on to my number one team on the 5 outside, and that's Ole Miss. I do not think they played this past weekend. Excuse me. They do go into the week 7-3, and obviously they have some big wins. They handed Alabama, who honestly I think would be the number one. I think far and away would be the number one team in the nation right now if they hadn't lost Ole Miss. But they did. So Ole Miss does head into a game this weekend against LSU, an LSU team that's just been kind of beat up the last 2 weeks. 31-14 loss to Arkansas was not something I even saw coming. LSU looked good, but Brandon Harris has proven that you can't really put the ball in his hands to win the game. So moving to my top 25. And at 25, I do have Arkansas. I understand it's a 4-loss Arkansas team, but they are pretty much on fire right now. The teams they're beating are solid top 25 teams. They have won 4 in a row now including wins against Auburn, Ole Miss, and LSU. So I mean, you got to throw them back in the top 25 sooner or later. They are a good team. They had some bumps in the road early in the season against Toledo Tech and then A&M. And, but they did, really ever since the Tennessee game, they've been pretty solid. They've been one of the better teams in the country. They beat a real solid Tennessee team, and then really competed with Alabama, gave them the best game they've had in a little while. So, I think Arkansas is a good team. I do think they deserve to be in the top 25 now. I understand it's a 6-4 team, but still. All right, move on to my 24 team, which is Washington State, a team that has really competed well this year that no one saw coming. Like I said about UCLA, they did get a 31-27 win. Luke Falk did get hurt, but he came back and just played really well to finish off the game. Peyton Bender did get I think he had 57 yards and one touchdown on like 6 pass attempts or something while he was in the game. Kid just kind of looked scared whenever he was in the game, but got it done. Got him some points that they definitely needed in the end. All right, so move on to my 23, and that is Oregon. So Oregon does crack the top 25 again. Again, I think that was my only other upset of the week. And I wasn't too confident on it because Stanford has been a real solid team this year. But like I said, Oregon's been, I won't say looking like the Oregon of old, but the defense is playing better. Vernon Adams starting to find his groove, and Royce Freeman's just a monster. Like, there's no other way around that. He's been really good. I've been saying all year that the problem with Oregon is not their skill positions. Their skill positions, I think, are as good as ever. I wouldn't say as good as ever, but it's definitely not a down year at their skill positions. It's just a tough transition at quarterback and just not very good defense. And like I said, Vernon Adams starting to play better. He's not really turning the ball over at all. Royce Freeman's just been playing insane. I think he played just as well as Christian McCaffrey this weekend. McCaffrey got held up pretty well. I mean, nothing bad against Stanford. Like they really did play well, but Oregon's a hot team right now. That's finding a way to win. So move on to my 21, and that is Wisconsin, and a team that really hasn't lost since the Iowa game, and now, I think it's two of the top 6 teams, or the 2 teams they've lost to are top 6 teams, and they've looked pretty solid the last couple of weeks. Obviously, the Alabama loss ain't looking too bad now, and they could have easily won the Iowa game, and it was a 4-point game. Iowa has played a lot of teams close, but watching that game, you kind of felt like Wisconsin was going to win, and they just let it go at the end. All right, so move on to my number 20, and that is Northwestern. So Northwestern, tough team to figure out this year. They have won, I want to say 4 in a row now. Tough team to figure out. It seemed like they were heading downhill, doing what they did in 2013. Staying bowl eligible, but pretty much getting eliminated from the top 25 after like the first 4 or 5 weeks. And they've definitely been hanging around. They won 3 in a row, and yeah, they just got thrashed back-to-back weeks by 2 pretty good teams, Iowa and Michigan. But they have beat, I'd give it, 2 pretty solid teams since then, Penn State and Nebraska. And they do have some pretty solid wins this year. They shut out Minnesota, which Minnesota's been a tough out this year for a lot of teams. They did beat Duke, and obviously they have beaten Stanford. So Northwestern, pretty successful season for them. I do believe, yes, they have a game. They actually have a pretty good game against Wisconsin this weekend. Should be entertaining. Big week in the Big Ten this weekend, though. So move on to number 19, LSU. So LSU just has had as rough 2 weeks, these last 2 weeks as anyone. Just offense cannot score. And, the defense is, you can't really blame it on the defense. I mean, obviously they didn't play great against Arkansas, but they held tough against Bama at times, and the offense just hasn't been able to support. And Fournette gets shut down, and that pretty much shuts down the entire team. So it's hard for me to put him inside the top 15 with the 2 losses they've just had. You lose 2 in a row, you're probably going to fall out of the top 15, and I believe they are 17 in the AP poll, but I'd drop them a little bit further. So move on to number 18, Utah. So tough weekend for them. They face an Arizona team that's been really up and down this year. That's hard to figure out. Arizona's, like I said, Arizona, hard team to figure out. They gave USC a contest 2 weeks ago, and that was right after just getting blown out by Washington. So I don't know. I really believe that Utah is still a good team. I mean, it took double overtime for them to lose. And, they do still have a lot of impressive wins, but the combination of the Utah and Stanford losses this weekend just completely eliminated the Pac-12 from playoff contention. All right, so move on to number 17, TCU. TCU is number 11 in the AP poll for this week, but I don't know. I don't see how you can get thrashed on the road and then barely beat Kansas. And really, they haven't. I mean, they beat Minnesota. That's about it. And they do have some kind of impressive wins, but I don't know. Heading into a game against OU this weekend, that's not. I feel like it's not going to be pretty for them. Not sure on Boykin's whole situation. I know he missed the rest of the game, and Doxson's out for the season. Obviously, that hurts real bad. But their whole thing was just the depth all around. The defense has honestly been playing better. I mean, outside of that Oklahoma State game, but they're facing maybe the hottest team in the country right now, heading to this week against Oklahoma. So I don't know. It's going to be. I think it's going to be a tough game for TCU. All right, so move on to number 16, Stanford. So Stanford, obviously tough loss. Another close one for them. And I don't know. I mean, they could still finish the year Pac-12 champs. But right now, I don't know if they're tied with Oregon at the top of the Pac-12 North. But I don't think they've clinched the Pac-12 North yet. No, I mean, they do have to win out in the Pac-12. But that just entails beating Cal. So it is Cal Stanford, so you never know. Cal is still a pretty good team. I mean, they've had they've lost 3 of their last 5 or something like that, 4 of the last 5. But they were able to get a blowout win against Oregon State, so that might get them back on track a little bit. They are a bowl eligible team, so definitely a team that you can't take lightly. But obviously Stanford, they can get it done. They clinch Pac-12 North, and they can go to the Pac-12 championship, and they're still might be the best team in the Pac-12. Inside my rankings, their highest ranked team. Wow. Anyway, sorry. When I skip from 23 to 21, I jumped over USC. So 22 is USC. They beat Colorado 27-24. I'm going to make this real quick. USC's been pretty good ever since the rough stretch of 5 games where they had 3 losses. Notre Dame game, they played real close, though. Obviously, the Washington game was just ugly. And then the Stanford game. So, 2 quality losses and then 1 that just, got away from them. But they have been really impressive. They beat Utah. A little close against Colorado. A little close against Arizona last week, too. But, when it's put together, USC is one of the most talented teams in the country. All right, so back to where I was, which is number 15, Navy. So I don't really get at all why Navy's so low in the rankings. I believe they're number 19 in the AP poll. And you know what? I have the confidence to say they could take down teams ranked below them. I mean, yeah, there's some good teams below them, but man, Navy's been really good the last couple of weeks. They beat Memphis pretty handily. I'd say they're the favorites right now to win the AAC. And, obviously they have the Houston game left, which is going to be huge. But, obviously they're not a playoff team. But they blew out SMU 55-14. And to me, they look like one of the best teams in the country right now. And one of the best non-Power 5 teams. So move on to number 14, Florida State. So Florida State did benefit from a pretty chaotic weekend inside the top 20. And they had a real solid win against a good NC State team. They were losing for a little bit, but able to come back with a 134-17, which for Florida State this year is a big one because NC State is solid. They've given some good teams some real tough tests this year, and Florida State being able to overcome that and win by double digits is actually huge. So move on to number 13, Michigan, and another game that came down to the wire for them. So you had Minnesota, I believe it was last week, and then Indiana, they were pretty much behind the entire game, but able to come back and win 48-41 in double overtime. Defense isn't looking near as good as it was at the beginning of the season. They're still a solid team. They still do have 2 close losses. One to Michigan State that obviously they probably should have won, and then Utah, which was just the first game of the season. But they're going to give Ohio State a tough test. It's probably going to happen, and I'm not confident enough to say they're going to win right now because JT Barrett comes back and Ohio State looks solid. But they do look like they are definitely one of the top 3 best teams in the Big Ten. I'll put it that way. All right, so move on to number 12, Houston, and they inked out a close one against Memphis. I believe they were down 20-0 at one point. and they did win 35-34, and they are the lone, I believe they're the lone undefeated team left in the non-Power 5 conferences. So, obviously not really an opportunity to go to the playoff this year, but definitely a chance to lock up a pretty solid New Year's Six bowl and final top 20, or maybe even final top 10 ranking. Excuse me. So move on to number 11, North Carolina. So just destroyed two pretty good teams in the last 2 weeks. After beating Duke 66-31, they come into a game with Miami team that has been very up and down this year, but a team that's pretty decent nonetheless, and just absolutely destroy them 59-21. It looks like they could give Clemson a run for their money. It would be interesting to see what happens with North Carolina if they do win out and actually beat Clemson. See if they would actually make the playoff, but it's wild to think that North Carolina could actually make it. That South Carolina loss at the beginning of the year is killing them. Get rid of that loss, and they could be a top 5 team right now. All right, so move on to number 10, Baylor. So rough weekend for Baylor. Losing to OU, they're pretty much out of the playoffs completely, but they still can lock up the Big 12. They have a huge game this weekend against Oklahoma State in Stillwater, and Baylor can win that game. Obviously, they insert themselves right back into Big 12 title contention, and it's not looking like TCU is going to put up as tough of a test against Baylor as they probably should have. It's not looking like that TCU Baylor game is going to be the most influential game on the Big 12 this year. It's looking like the Bedlam game will be. All right, so move on to number 9, Michigan State, and a 27-14 win against Maryland. But either way, got it done, and then move into the Ohio State game this weekend. So I don't know. It's tough to predict how Michigan State is going to show out, because they do tend to play down and play up to the opponent, or they always play down to the opponents. And that did come back to bite them once against Nebraska, and I think it's going to be interesting to see if they are able to beat Ohio State again, kind of like the same situation as North Carolina, and then go into a Big Ten championship, maybe win. It'd be interesting to see if you can make the playoffs with a loss to Nebraska. So it was 24-7, by the way, Michigan State and Maryland. All right, so move on to number 8, Florida. So the LSU loss not looking great, but it was a close game. They do have a lot of impressive wins this year, and they are looking like a pretty dominant team. The defense is looking real good. They have the SEC East locked up, and it's pretty sure thing that if they win the SEC, then they're going to be in the college football playoff. That's just the way things are going for the SEC this year, and I think that's honestly the way it's going to go for them every year. But as long as they can take care of business the rest of the way, I think they'll be fine. Obviously, they still have a tough game against Florida State. But obviously they do control their own destiny. They win out, then they're probably in the college football playoff. They did get a win against South Carolina last week. The South Carolina team has been a tough out of recent weeks, but they do play Florida Atlantic this week, so should be maybe a little bit of a good confidence boost before they head into the Florida State game. But they do get the Florida State game in the Swamp. Not too familiar on that rivalry, but having that at home should probably help them out. So move on to number 7, Oklahoma. I think they're as hot as anyone in the country right now. It'll be crazy to see what happens if they do win out, which is a possibility, but they still have to get through TCU and Oklahoma State. Obviously not cakewalks, but that take away the Texas loss, and obviously they're a top 4 team, but they've just been on fire since then, and offense is looking real good. Baker Mayfield's looking real good. They've been incorporating the running game back into it. Defense has been looking better. Defensive line is definitely coming along. Eric Stryker, Charles Tapper, they're both looking really good. If I didn't just say, secondary's been looking a little bit better too. Excuse me. So move on to number 6, Iowa. So 40-35 win against Minnesota for Iowa was honestly kind of a blowout compared to what we've seen this season from them, compared maybe aside from the Northwestern game. So like I said, Minnesota's been a tough out for teams the last couple of weeks. Literally came right down to the wire against Michigan, and then Iowa keeps winning, and Um, I don't know if they really have any trap games left. I believe they play Nebraska. Yeah, they play Nebraska on the road this Friday. So, I think if there's any trap games left for them or any games that, will be tough, I think it'll be that one. I think that could be a pretty good game. And, there are other teams in the, I think it's Big Ten. This is bad. There are other teams in the Big Ten West that, do have the ability to win out. And if Iowa loses, they probably have to lose 2 in a row, but if they do lose 2 in a row and Wisconsin wins out, then they can still win the division. So, I can't say I'm going to see it happening, but, it'll be interesting to watch what Iowa does for the next 2 weeks. I'm not entirely sure here they finish. Oh, never mind. They play Purdue this week, so, obviously shouldn't be a loss. Purdue team is 2-8, but they can't take a team like Nebraska lightly, because if they do lose to a team like Nebraska and they do win the Big Ten, then I don't think there's a chance of them going to the playoff. There's too low, or they're just ranked too low right now, and you lose to a team like that, it's just going to knock you out. All right, so move on to number 5, Notre Dame. 28-7 win against Wake Forest, and they just keep rolling. Haven't really been blowing out teams this year, but it just, whenever you're watching Notre Dame, it always feels like they're in control of the game. Obviously, outside of the Clemson game, they've just been extremely competitive this year. A very talented team that it's definitely a threat. I think if they win out, they are in the college football playoff. It'll be interesting to see what happens, though. So I'll move on to my number 4, which is Oklahoma State. So, big scare in Ames. Looked like it was going to be 2011 all over again. And, they were able to come out with the win and move into the Baylor game this weekend undefeated. So, win against Baylor, and I don't think that'll lock down the Big 12. No, it won't lock down the Big 12. But, they can. I think they do get a share of the title if they win. I don't know if they do no, they actually said it's by head-to-head. So, if Oklahoma State can win this weekend, it'll all come down to the Bedlam game. Not only will it come down to the Bedlam game for the Big 12 title, but also for the college football playoff. And, I don't know, the Bedlam games right now is looking like it might be one of the biggest games for the rest of the year. So, move on to number 3, Alabama. And, just really destroyed Mississippi State. Wasn't an absolute blowout, but it's 31-6 against a Mississippi State team that was looking really good and looking like they could. I wouldn't say upset Alabama, but definitely put up a good fight, and they did none of the sorts. So, Alabama really, outside of that Ole Miss loss, they're definitely. I wouldn't say definitely with Notre Dame still there, but they are. I'd say they're still the best one-loss team right now, and with the way the SEC West is going right now, they do control their own destiny, and looks like they'll be playing for the SEC title again. So move on to number 2, Ohio State, and big game this weekend against Michigan State. If they can win that, then that pretty much. I don't know if I would go as far as saying even if they win this Michigan State game, they do still have the Michigan game left, so I don't know. But they're 2 huge weeks for Ohio State coming up. They do have Michigan State and Michigan. Obviously, if they can retire both those, then they're sitting pretty heading into the Big Ten championship game. Man, they got an extremely tough set of next 3 games. They do win out, like I said, then it'll end up being Michigan State, and probably Iowa, and that's 3, at least in my rankings, 3 top 13 teams right there in a span of about 5 weeks. So move on to my number 1 team, and it's still Clemson. So, kind of seemed like they were snoozing against Syracuse, but a lot of people saw that coming. The Clemson-South Carolina game is not as big a threat to them as ever, or as it was before. Obviously, South Carolina's had Clemson's number the last couple of years, but it's just different this year. Clemson's just so much better. They're not pulling off the Clemsoning anymore. And then, they just. Really, I think their toughest test left on the year is North Carolina. If they can get past that, they're in. North Carolina's been looking real good, though, so, I mean, it's not going to be a cakewalk for Clemson to the title. A lot of people thought it would just be I wouldn't say a mediocre Duke team, but a Duke team that, really wouldn't put much of a fight up against Clemson. And Clemson could just walk into the college football playoff, and it doesn't look like it's going to be that way. So, yeah, long video for my top 25 rankings this week, but it was a pretty crazy week in college football. And, looking forward to another good weekend of college football. Got a couple big games, Baylor, Oklahoma State, Michigan State, Ohio State. So, yeah, should be entertaining, and that's pretty much it. Let's go.